Today we are going to be looking at Brexit, the British exit from the European Union. What we know today as Brexit was started off by a referendum in 2016 held by the Conservative Party for citizens of the United Kingdom voting whether to leave or remain in the European Union or EU. But it didn't start there. As a matter of fact, the UK was not even always a part of the European community. In 1963 and 67, the UK applied to join the European Economic Community, but was vetoed by the President of France, Charles de Gaulle, for a suspicion of being a Trojan horse for the United States. Once de Gaulle's presidency ended in 1969, the United Kingdom's third application was granted. Then in 1975, a divided Labour government under the leadership of Prime Minister Harold Wilson led a United Kingdom European Community's membership referendum to decide whether or not the renegotiations should occur between the UK and the EC. Ultimately, the referendum failed 2 votes to 1, and the United Kingdom remained in the European Community. Since the 1975 referendum, the EC went through a series of changes to form a pillar of what is now known as the EU in 1993 with the Maastricht Treaty, and later in 2009 with the Lisbon Treaty, which engulfed all 3 pillars into one. So now we have the EU, which establishes an internal single market that guarantees the free movement of goods, capital, services, and labor through all 28 member states. And while we are at it, we also have a new party, the United Kingdom Independence Party, that wants the UK to leave this European single market. UKIP is slowly stealing votes from the Conservative Party, and in an attempt to win back support, the Conservative Party promises a referendum to leave the EU if they win a majority. All this takes us up to the 2015 general election of the United Kingdom, which, thanks to their first-past-the-post single-member district voting system, leads to one of the least proportional victories in history. The Conservative Party, with 37% of the popular vote, ends up with 51% of the seats in Parliament and thus 100% of the power. Honoring their word, they hold the United Kingdom European Union membership referendum in June of 2016. Note that the Conservative Party is neutral on remaining or leaving, and some members of Parliament, like the Prime Minister David Cameron, actually favour remaining in the EU, predicting an economic crisis if the UK are to initiate Brexit. In an incredible voter turnout, the state as a whole votes 52 to 48 to leave the EU. You may be wondering, what about parliamentary sovereignty? Doesn't Parliament have the final say in what happens? When did a directly democratic vote decide the course of action for the United Kingdom? Well, the answer to all those questions is, the referendum is not legally bound to anything. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister can disregard the results and continue with his term. However, to do so would be a huge threat to democracy and legitimacy of the government in the United Kingdom. So instead, Cameron steps down. Theresa May steps up, and now she holds the reins of the Brexit train. Let's pause and think about why the UK would want to leave the EU in the first place. For one, the EU supplies the UK with nearly frictionless trade to other member countries. However, the single market also allows open borders between member countries, and with Euroscepticism on the rise with UKIP's manifesto, the UK is trending towards isolation rather than accommodation. Great Britain has also always prided itself with its use of the pound, and although there are a few other EU member states that have not adopted the euro as its national currency, Great Britain's sense of nationalism is threatened by the external forces from the EU. In addition, laws set by the European Union Parliament supersede British law, jeopardizing the parliamentary sovereignty of the Westminster model. Okay, so back to May. It's now November, and the members of Parliament grant the Prime Minister permission to trigger Article 50, the European law to withdraw from the European Union. Fast forward another 3.5 months, and the EU leader Donald Tusk receives a nicely worded letter saying that May has triggered Article 50, and the UK are on a course to leave the EU in 2 years. So what now? Well, we don't really know for certain yet, but there are 3 options. The least probable is that nothing happens. While it is not easy to cancel Article 50, the ambiguity with which it is written suggests that it is not impossible. Even so, I don't think we will be seeing a British U-turn on Brexit. That leaves us with 2 more options. The next option is that the UK leaves the EU completely. A so-called no deal would occur if no negotiations were made between the UK and EU in the 2-year window leading up to the official date of March 29, 2019. As a side note, this date can only be extended by a unanimous vote from the EU. Such a deal would likely be catastrophic for the UK. For one, Scotland, who, unlike England, voted overwhelmingly to stay in the EU, declared that they would hold an independence referendum were the UK to leave the EU. In addition, a no deal would entail that the borders, such as the one between Northern Ireland, currently British, and the Republic of Ireland, currently Irish, be monitored as international. It would also impose a tariff on all exports and imports from EU member states, as the United Kingdom would be no more involved with the European Union than, say, the United States or China, and would have to follow the World Trade Organization's "no country gets any special treatment unless you have a trade deal." As a result, it is likely that an economic crisis would follow. So that leaves option 3, where the UK negotiates like mad with the EU to solve all of the problems stated above. This has already led to some interesting occurrences, such as Theresa May's snap election called for June 8, 2017. She hopes that the Conservative Party can beat out the currently in a lot of disarray Labour Party to win a greater majority in the House of Commons. The timetable also includes the Great Repeal Bill, which will allow the UK Parliament to absorb all of the laws of the EU and thus pick and choose what they wish to keep. Until then, all EU laws still apply to the UK, as does free trade and movement of people between the EU member states and the United Kingdom. We will just have to wait and see what happens next.